Hey, everybody. Went live. Alrighty. Let's do this. Let's probably bring the camera down just a tad so we can see native film talk in the back. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. It was a good, I would have done this once before New Year's, but I freaking got sick at bronchitis before the New Year. So the gift that seems to keep on giving in 23. But appreciate everyone joining the live. I have a few things I wanted to talk about. And let's see, just making sure I'm getting all my socials right. So I want to talk about a few things. I want to talk about Echo trailer. Wanted to talk about award season. Golden Globes is going on right now. If you're following and you see if Lily Gladstone wins, go ahead and drop that in the chat. That'd be pretty cool if you let me know. And then Taylor Sheridan recently was on Joe Rogan's podcast, so I wanted to talk about that also. I got this sweet "Water is Life" hat for Christmas, so just thought I would rock that for um, the live. You got any questions, comments? Drop it in the chat. Any feedback, of course. So let's talk. Where do we start here? Let's talk Taylor Share. No, let's talk Echo. So Echo, I'm really excited. I shouldn't say really excited. I'm more excited than I was before. I was kind of lukewarm about Echo, and I made my thoughts clear on just in general my opinion on Echo. Really more Phase Five Marvel. So, um, I'm not a big fan of what has transpired for Phase 5, but I am very excited because, uh, the Aliqua, I believe is how you say her name, she's phenomenal, and I'm just really excited. I forgot how much I'm anticipating seeing Vincent D'Onofrio to play Kingpin again, and all of the interviews that he has had has nothing but positive things to say. Over at Native Media Theory, he interviewed a few people from Echo, and I think I highly encourage you to go check that out. But I'm more encouraged than I was before. I'm really, really looking forward to today's the 7th, so 2 more days. Echo will come out, and all of the episodes will be available and I'm really excited to watch those and see Devery Jacobs in something as well. And yeah, I'm just really excited to watch those to watch Echo and yeah, I'm more optimistic than I was before. Um, yeah, I'll put it that way. And I just got word from my wife that Lily Gladstone did win Best Actress, and so that's pretty awesome. Unfortunately, I wish I could like stream side by side her acceptance speech, but I'll probably do a reaction on her speech. But that's huge. Lily Gladstone winning that award, I mean, 1, she's native, so that's, like, a big win for Indian country, but I didn't think that I don't know, I just didn't think it'd be possible in my lifetime for she's, like, the first native person to be getting this much critical acclaim for a leading role in a feature film, and that's awesome. That's, like, just the right stepping stone that we need, and personally, I think that Fancy Dance was a better movie. I personally think Fancy Dance was a better movie, a better role for her. I think she should have been nominated for that. I think she did a great job in Killers of the Flower Moon. I don't know if it's her best work, in my opinion. I shouldn't say I don't feel like it is, but I'm happy that this work is getting recognized because this is raises the bar for all future Native artists. Now it's like that's something you can strive to. Look, we got a Golden Globe winner, and we have Academy Award nominated Native person, and I'm really excited for that too. We'll see how that transpires. I feel like they give the Golden Globe to the person that's not going to win the Academy Award. That's like my and a lot of people's theory. So we'll see how that transpires as we get closer. If you have any questions or comments, drop it in the chat. So that's Echo out of the way, and now that we know Lily Gladstone won the Golden Globes, congratulations, Lily. I think I want to move on to something that I really want to talk about. I really want to talk about Taylor Sheridan being on Joe Rogan's podcast. If you don't know who Taylor Sheridan is at this point, Taylor Sheridan is the showrunner, creator of the show Yellowstone, along with all of its spin-offs. So you have 1883, 1923, I believe, is the most recent one that came out with with Harrison Ford in it, and everyone is in the Sheridan verse. So this is like white people Shonda Rhimes, basically, or like I don't know. I guess it's like the male version of like Shonda Rhimes, like the Shonda verse, Shonda Land. Sheridan has his own universe that he's creating, and regardless of how you feel about it, he's extremely successful in that arena. And he went on Joe Rogan's podcast. They had a 3.5 hour long chat. And I listened because, well, I don't know, I'm a casual fan of, casual listener of Joe Rogan's podcast. He's really been hit or miss the 5 years for me. So I just tune in whenever I see someone that's interesting. But I tuned in because I wanted to see what he would say about Native people, because that's like a big foundation of all of his stories. If you've seen Wind River, you've seen Yellowstone, 1883, there's natives all throughout it. I mean, the focus of Wind River was Native people. So I wanted to watch it with that in mind. And I wasn't disappointed because they talked about Native people. And overall, Taylor Sheridan and Joe Rogan just had this like mentality of like, don't we have it figured out? Us people that live in Texas, those idiots that live in California, those liberals that are super sensitive. And they acknowledge that there's super sensitive people on both sides, like both on the far right and on the far left on the political spectrum. But they only focused on the people that were on the far left and talked about how idiot they how much idiocy exists on that side and not so much on the other side of the aisle, which depending on your political lean you can be bothered by. I personally just found it ridiculous that they didn't acknowledge the other side, which I mean, you could kind of tell the political lean of Taylor Sheridan just based on the conversation. But I think what was important was when Native people came up. Um, it's something that I'm gonna make a video on, I believe a YouTube video, and then share it on social shortly. Is I'm sorry, Joe Rogan has had multiple historians, all white, I should point out, historians, anthropologists, and Native American studies professors, and I want to say dating back 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, he started having these individuals on talking about Native people, both with different focus areas, talking about different wars in particular, or just talking about a group. One individual was like a Comanche expert, and I just so he started learning more about Native history through these individuals. I believe he's had 5 people up to this point. Nah, maybe 4. But in the reason why all that's relevant is he brought those conversations up during the Taylor Sheridan interview, and something that he mentioned when talking to Taylor Sheridan, and something he's regurgitated multiple times, is that 90% of the native population in the Americas, North and South America, were eradicated by disease from contact. So, like, I believe the stat that's thrown out or that is like roughly 90% of all of the indigenous population in North and South America was eradicated by disease. And his words are that's not talked about. That story is not talked about enough. And while that may be true, and there are varying degrees of truth in that, I they the rest of the conversation between Taylor Sheridan and Joe Rogan, Taylor Sheridan does have respect for Native people. He does have an immense amount of knowledge in terms of Native history. I think, especially for someone who isn't Native, he's got a decent amount. And so they do acknowledge the mis handling of the United States government when it comes to their relationship with Native people. They do acknowledge the mistreatment of Native people, and they do acknowledge the continued mistreatment of Native people. But it's very small and is very like, wasn't all that shit terrible that they did? Yeah, it's terrible, terrible, terrible. But did you know that roughly 90% of all indigenous people were killed by smallpox, by measles, and, uh, in that crate, that's not talked about enough. Almost to minimize all of the well, that's I know that's not their intent. I'm positive that is not what they're doing. But as someone who has an ear for that kind of thing, that listens out, it's like, okay, when you minimize, you're minimizing everything that Native people have endured intact by saying, well, if 90% of all of the Native people were eradicated by disease, then what was remaining wasn't that bad. We put them, we removed them from the reservations. We attempted to genocide. When that didn't work, we attempted to assimilate, and then when that didn't work, we just put them on reservations and gave them poor resources. We brought them from the Department of War into the Department of Interior and are now stewards of these people, and we have to coexist with them. Now we're going to try to make it harmonious. But all of that removed, 90% of these people were eradicated by disease. So it wasn't really that bad what we did, because there wasn't as many as we all thought there were. And I say that because out of all of the facts that Joe Rogan regurgitates about Native people, that is the most repeated point. Is, did you know that white people, settlers, colonial settlers, were not the most predominant reason why Native people aren't here today? To me, that is what he is saying. In I'm not twisting his words. I should say, you could definitely accuse me of twisting his words, but I think for a he is not saying that, but for a casual audience member, and his reach is global. There is no doubt that his reach is global. My problem with that statement is somebody who has zero contact with Native people, zero dude, no Native people at all, or have any really care to look into history with Native people, they're going to take that as fact, and they're just going to run with it. They're going to repeat it at bars, they're going to repeat it at friends' houses, and it's going to become this echo chamber of like, did you know we didn't really kill that many Native people? Like, disease killed these people, not us, disease. So, I mean, the conditions that they're in is their fault. They should pull themselves up by their bootstraps. It's their fault that they're in their position. It wasn't us. It wasn't the United States government. It was them. It was just bad timing. They were barbaric. They were prehistoric people. They were living and riding on horseback and still and there's this parallel that's always made of like, well, Native people at the same time the Eiffel Tower was built, at the same time the pyramids were being built in pyramids were being built in Egypt, these people were still riding on horseback. These people were still shooting bows and arrows. At the same time the rifle was being built, they were still just using their bow and arrows. So it almost, like, sets up this narrative. You're even though in the Taylor Sheridan and Joe Rogan interview, Taylor Sheridan does acknowledge that manifest destiny, the idea of manifest destiny, is wrong. The way that you frame your history by saying, "Isn't it crazy that you almost had this, like, time machine of the Americas where you had the indigenous population, specifically in North America, not almost like not advancing past the Stone Age," is how they view it. Their civilization did not advance past the Stone Age. And meanwhile, in other countries, they have like an industrial revolution. They're starting to learn how to use fossil fuels, and they're starting basically like the spawn of capitalism. And almost like to say they were destined to be taken over. They were destined to be uh, a slave class. They were destined to be conquered because they didn't have a chance. And to a degree, I can see the point, and I can I to a point I completely agree. But it just sets up a mindset for people that have no exposure to Native people that I think is just it's destined to be misinformed, and I think it perpetuates bad information. My opinion. So I don't know, everybody. That Taylor Sheridan interview was interesting. Taylor Sheridan's, I don't know. I'm kind of past the point of like hating what he does and everything he does. Like I'll consume his content just to see what it is, but for the most part, I just don't like how enamored the everyday person is with his content, because he does push out content that's historical now. Yellowstone, I had my qualms with, because that was present day native representation. I had my qualms with it. And you could feel however you want about Yellowstone. Where I really have issues with is 1883. And then 1923, I haven't seen any of it yet with Harrison Ford. But 1883, that's where it starts to get dangerous because you're starting to almost not rewrite history, but you're starting to tell the history that you want to be told. And some of it is revisionist. Some of it is not revisionist. Some of it is just romanticized perspective of the lens that you want to tell. Of like, look at this little perspective that potentially did actually happen, but now you're going to preach it as gospel. Now you're going to show non-native and native relationships happening of like look at it was just they're just romantic people. They were just at the end of their era. They were at the end of their time. The native people's time of dominance in this continent was dwindling. The population of the buffalo was dwindling, and it was just a matter of time before they were squeezed out. And here is an example of what they were doing during that time when they were just about to be pushed out, and then white people moving west, and it was really romanticizing them of like, look at how badass the pioneer was. Look at how daring the pioneer was to leave your homeland altogether and take a chance on the Wild West when there's no government, there's no rules, and you got wild Indians riding horseback all over the place that at any moment could just take you and your family out and set your everything you own on fire. And all of a sudden spawns this romance of like, oh, these Indians are not actually all bad. They're capable of love. Not only are they capable of love, they have more advanced ways of looking at the world that we should be gleaning into. But oh, too bad. We can't take their knowledge and everything that they know because the buffalo's dying and the buffalo's dying and all of a sudden now their race is disappearing. So let's just take this romanticized version of who native people are and let's carry that into the future. And that's what Joe Rogan and Taylor Sheridan did in their interview, and that's I think what Joe Rogan unfortunately does um is uh talks about this talks about anecdotal stories with native people when when settlers would get captured either by trade or by raids. Either yeah. So like non-native people would get captured and then brought into native communities, and he always talks about the romanticized story of like every time they left, they wanted to come back. And when it was the reverse, when native people got captured and brought into settler colonial society, like they never wanted to stay there. They wanted to go straight back to where they came from. And I just thought that was he does talk about that a lot too. Almost like the romanticization of native just community itself without understanding exactly like what community is. That's why I would love for like Sterling Harjo to come on, and not just Sterling Harjo so you can check the box and say, "Oh, I got a native person on Joe Rogan." I want him to have like native historians who are like actual native people. We have plenty of them. My degree, one of my majors was in Native American studies, and at least my undergrad degree. And there are a slew of native professors across America. No joke, hundreds, like professors, tenured, non-tenured, going through the ranks, doc students. Like there are so many experts that are actually native people, and I don't know what the vetting process is to get to a point where you talk on a podcast at the level of Joe Rogan. But the fact that we have all of these non-native people talking about both from an archaeological standpoint, and then especially where it irks me is talking about present day native people. When they're painting this broad picture of who native people were, and then almost like to a point, it feels like they're just speculating about who they are today. It's dangerous because while they might be informed, they're only informed from like that pinhole, like they're just looking at you from that lens and they're just like, okay, that's who native people are. I see it. I see it. When in reality, there's this whole world that's not explored. And that's part of why I want to do my freaking show again, is because it's just like, well, if we don't have a Joe Rogan to do that, we need somebody to talk about that shit. Because, geez, man, it's frustrating to have that surface level scratched when it comes to like native perspective, native identity, native history, the truth about native people. And then knowing that like, hey, you uncovered a piece that is not telling the whole truth, or you uncovered a piece that is like partially true. You need to talk more about that. But Excuse me. That's not the purpose of his show. He brings people on that he thinks are interesting and he wants to talk to, or he reads one of their books and he's fascinated by it. And that's okay because that's his prerogative. That's what he wants to do. It's on everybody else to call it out and say like, "Hey, that's not right. Therefore, I'm going to bring somebody else on my show." So we got a couple of comments. Taylor with his movie Wind River just made the stereotypical white savior narrative. Absolutely. Jeremy Renner swooping in, not from the community at all. Um, it was just typical, like, I'm more Indian than you. Yes, I'm not from your community. I'm not from the Cheyenne Arapaho, I believe. I don't know. That I think those might be two different tribes, Ian. Um, I don't remember what tribal land Wind River took place on. Um, but anyway, Jeremy Renner's lady in that movie or ex was Julia Jones. And in the community full of native people, Graham Greene was also another he was just like a game and fish guy, but he was like the best tracker in town. Just not from the community at all, not from his like to hell with traditional ecological knowledge. TEK just goes out the window when you're Jeremy Renner in a Taylor Sheridan film. Like screw TEK. TEK means nothing. If you acknowledge traditional ecological knowledge, then Graham Greene probably would have been the most knowledgeable, or there would have been a cohort of people that had more information that were the knowledge keepers of like time immemorial. But nope, it was Taylor Sheridan's vision that Jeremy Renner would be the most competent person in that community that could save everybody. When a missing, murdered Indigenous woman case happened, the MMIW case with Kelsey Aspill, aka Kelsey Chow, and yeah, so that was a mess. Anyway, so the next comment is that's Hollywood in general though. Only media we get is white savior or sad, pitiful Indian. I would normally agree with you. I would say 2 years ago, but I think there's a narrative being pushed now by people of like, hey, we not even a narrative. There's a demonstration that we can tell our own stories and that we are competent enough to lead our own projects. And so I'm excited to see what that yields moving because we great examples so far. Rutherford Falls is a perfect one. Um, Pieces of Resident Alien wasn't led by a content creator who was native, but there were actors, native writers on that show. And then another one is Res Dogs, the gold standard moving forward. And another question. I think Rogan should talk to a boarding school survivor. I think that's a good one. But my only thing with that is that they have to be a boarding school survivor who actually knows stuff. I like uh bro science is evident in Joe Rogan's podcast. You there's no way you can get someone talking for 3 hours, and you could be and it's always in person. So some of these people are under the influence of alcohol, drugs. I say drugs, I should be very specific. Some weed, sometimes they take mushrooms, sometimes they smoke, like cigars, cigarettes, and then they sit there and they drink, sometimes beer, like hard alcohol. And they're sitting there and they're just riffing and they're just talking. Sometimes they get comedians on there and they're just talking about nothing for 3.5 hours, and it is absolutely entertaining. And then other times you get people like recurring guests like Jordan Peterson or Neil deGrasse Tyson, who are experts in their particular field, but Joe Rogan takes them all over the place and they talk about everything. And my fear is going back to your question when someone said, I think Joe Rogan should talk to a boarding school survivor. I feel like he's gonna take it everywhere with that boarding school survivor. And so that boarding school survivor needs to be well rounded, needs to be an academic of some kind, maybe somebody who is well versed in Native history, Native wars, Native warfare. Like this person needs to be a Swiss Army knife of Native American studies because of all of the different tangents that Joe Rogan's going to take him in. And I think like Sterling Harjo could be someone that could hold their own, but I need someone also that's going to have enough humility to say I don't know enough about that. rather than just like shooting from the hip because they want to be Joe Rogan's friend and they want to be someone who has all the knowledge and they're just going to keep throwing out facts or at least conjecture that they think are facts. So there's only a handful of native people that could do that, and that's what makes it dangerous. Is he going to pick one of those handful of native people? Who knows? With our luck, he'll get a pretendian. So whatever. Somebody made a comment. Well, greetings, cousin. Hey, what's up, everybody? Um, Another comment is grateful as I am for the new boom of native media. I'm worried this might come and go like the Indian wave in the 90s. I have that concern. So, those of you that were following, um, I'm just not going to have headphones on. Those of you that were following, man, I've never showed my ears on one of these lives. I always have headphones on. So, those of you that were following what we were doing on Indigenous Talk with our reviews of Reservation Dogs, and then at the very end, those of you that saw, we ended up talking to Sterling Harjo. And when we talked to Sterling Harjo, when we talked to Sterling Harjo, I had a question for him about, is this native representation boom short lived? Because I have that fear. And I outlined a financial reason why I feel like it could be short lived. Right now, I mean, everyone knows the economy is in a very dire place. Unless you're one of the ultra rich or people who already have a ton of accumulated assets. And so a lot of those assets are appreciating in this market and you're just becoming richer and richer. If you're a part of the renting class, you're on the outside looking in. If you have a lot of debt, especially credit card debt, it's very difficult for you to get out of your current situation. And current loans to get anything. If you tried to buy a car recently, you try to get a loan on anything, recreational vehicle, or even a home, you know that the loan prices are going up. And that is how construction is made. Most construction is by loans. So when you're building something new, you take out a loan and then you pay it back after you yield a profit from the people who buy the finished product. And why I tell that story, that's exactly how films are made. Producers go about and then people go and find the money and they go borrow the money. The cost to borrow is very high right now. You need to get something that, like, if you're going to sit there with $100 million in debt and you know, like, hey, we need to pay off this $100 million ASAP, and the interest rates for this are going to be 15%, 10%, regardless of what they are now, they're historically higher than what they have been, multiple times higher than what they've been. And so you have these people who are taking out this debt and they're like, I don't know how long I want to sit with this debt, but I don't want to hold on to it for very long. And I damn sure don't want to be stuck holding the bag because the longer that I hold this bag, that interest is going to keep tacking on to that principal that I took out. And it's dangerous. The cost to borrow makes it more risky to make movies. And so, as a person who is trying to bankroll these films and try to make these movies, you're going to try to pick something safe, quote unquote. And so I asked Joe Rogan. I asked Sterling Harjo, is that going to impact what we're going to be doing moving forward? Is that going to impact the ability to tell native stories moving forward? Because, in my opinion, I wouldn't view native stories as being safe, quote unquote. But he reassured me and he said, everything you said is true, but um, Reservation Dogs and Rutherford Falls are proof that they're profitable. And so I think native stories are going to continue to be told. I don't feel like it's going to be a short-lived boom. We might look back a decade from now and see a surge of like, oh, between 2022 and 2024 there was an uptick, but overall I think we've hit a new floor. And I think native representation is selling. I feel like we're way behind what our African American counterparts and our um Americans, like counterparts, like Hispanic Americans, I'm not sure what the right term is, were up against when they were trying to fight for representation and their own content. Like we're decades behind them. But just like how they eventually got enough media to the point where they could have their own channel, where they could have their own production studios, and then they're producing their own content. I mean, there's already like APTN up north, but we're gonna have that. We're gonna have something like that in the Americas for sure. Like it's not gonna. It might not be at the national scale. It might be more regional, but eventually it will be national, and it just might take. But I think with the availability of the internet and the availability of access through the internet, I should say, I think we'll get there. So we got a bunch of comments here. So even though it was only for 3 seasons, Reservation Dogs is one of my favorite shows of all time. I'm with you there. There is nothing that will top that feeling of just watching every episode and like the feeling I got of I didn't know you could do this. And in talking to Sterling Harjo, something that he was really excited about with Reservation Dogs and what it accomplished was it showed that natives can be in genre film. You can make a horror native film. You can make a native film. You can make a comedy native that was painfully obvious. You can make a drama native film. I think I said drama already, but it's twice as important. That's why. You can make a suspense native movie. And I think why all of that is important is we were relegated to period pieces up until just a few years ago. Like native people were like telling present day native stories wasn't looked at as profitable. To go back to the financial situation I posed. You're like, no, no, no. We want Last of the Mohicans. We want Dances with Wolves. We want Geronimo. Like the early '90s, the mid '90s, it was all that. And prior to that, it was all westerns. It's like, no, no, no. We want them all on horseback. We want the TP. We want the leather and feathers because that makes money. But Reservation Dogs now gives you a glimpse of like, not only can these people make you money, but here's all the other stories that you haven't told. And that's what I'm really excited about. So someone said, Ronaldo, I like the contrast in tone between Rutherford Falls and Reservation Dogs. Not every piece of native media needs to be dramatic or funny. They should be able to explore all genres. Yeah, and I just touched on that. Completely agree with you there. Completely agree with you. Um, Grazing Bull said we need more res humor for movies. I agree. I agree. But there are independent films being made that do that. Fry Bread Face and Me is another one of those movies that came out. It's an independent movie. It's available on Netflix now, and it has res humor in it. So highly recommend you check out Fry Bread Face and Me. It's very much a independent film. It was good. I didn't like love it as much as some people, but that's the cool thing is it's not a mindset of scarcity. I don't have to absolutely love it because it's there. I feel like 10 years ago, anything native, I had to love it. Shadow Wolves is a good example of this. Shadow Wolves is a not good movie. Apologize if you were in Shadow Wolves and watching this. It was not good. Not a good movie. But I feel like at the time I had to like it because it had natives in it. And um, there's a lot of movies like that. And I feel like with Fry Bread Face and Me, I'd give it a solid like 6, 7. There were moments I thought were but then overall it was good. It was great. My my favorite thing about Firebird Face and Me are the new actors that it's exposing us to. And I like that. I couldn't get past Martin Sensmeyer playing a Navajo. I just couldn't do it. Those of you that aren't Navajo maybe didn't see it as an issue, but I just was like, you could have got an actual Navajo person to be that. Kara Hodges, who is Navajo in there in this film, did a great job. I feel like she was awesome. Um, but yeah, Martin is a Navajo. Just like, what is that? What is happening right now? But Billy Luther, who directed the thing, he's a Navajo dude, so I give it a pass. It's like whatever. You got to have someone that has likability, and you got to have someone that has notoriety, I guess. So, but I say all that, and the two leads in the film, the two child actors, unknowns. This is their first role ever, and they freaking killed it. Those two are the star of the show. I need to remember the actors' names. I'm gonna look that up right now. So forgive me, Fry Bread Face and Me. The actor who plays Charlie Hogan. who plays Fry. Um, good God, she is an actor. She can act her ass off. She was so good. She was the counterpart to Keir Tallman, who played Benny. But God, Charlie Hogan, like if it's Hogan, I apologize, but I say Hogan because you got to be right or Navajo. But Charlie Hogan, good lord, like she was adorable and mean and raw and funny. Like she has a bright future. If she wants to continue to act, I sure as hell hope she does. I think she was great. She was great. We got a few more comments rolling in here. A bunch of Happy New Year. So Happy New Year, everybody. I wanted to do one of these lives to those of you that join later. I wanted to do one of these lives right around the New Year, between New Year's and Christmas. I freaking ended up in urgent care, got bronchitis, and it was brutal. It was the worst case of bronchitis I've had in my life. I had shortness of breath. Never had shortness of breath before. Those of you that are asthmatic, I pray for you because that was terrifying to have shortness of breath. To not be able to catch your breath was one of the most terrifying things in my life, and, obviously feeling much better now, I feel fine, but good God, like, it was brutal. Even when I had COVID and I ended up in the ER emergency room, it was not that bad. That I don't know what was up with this case of bronchitis, but it was terrible, so I couldn't get on and jump on, talk to you all, on live, so apologies for that one, but we're here now. We're here now. So hopefully I shouldn't say hopefully, I'm committing myself to do more with this channel. I think I figured out that the YouTube channel is what I want to lean into. The podcast episodes I will push out, and I'm really going to push to do these with guests. Um I think doing this live, this is how I'll continue to connect solo. But like I have a interview scheduled for Killers of the Flower Moon, and I'm gonna have a guest with me. And I want to do Echo, and I want to have a guest with me, even if it's my wife. I just want to be there with another native person talking about native content, because the subtitle to my podcast name is Natives Talking About Natives in Film, Native Film Talk, Natives Talking About Natives in Film, and most of the time it's me just talking about like stuff. So I am gonna do that. Gonna like if I'm talking about Echo, when I talk about Echo, when I talk about Killers of the Flower Moon, I'm gonna have a guest with me, and we'll be talking about the film. And I think that will also help just give a counterpoint if or double down on the point that we have, both good and bad. And I think it's good I think it's important to have that discourse and have not just having one individual talk so much. I feel like these lives are where I can talk at will and have my conversation with you all. But even now, it's technically not solo because you're giving me live feedback in the comment chat. Got a few more questions in here. Bobby Wilson would be good. I assume you're talking about Joe Rogan as a guest. I agree. They would get high as a kite, and I think that would just be entertaining. Bobby Wilson's a comedian. I think that would be freaking awesome. So Canada seems to be ahead of us in many ways. As a comment, I agree. Um, In certain yeah, I mean, that's how a lot of, the actors that we get now, I mean, even Graham Greene, Gary Farmer, they came from Canada, Tantu Cardinal, they came from that, um north of us because of what is available with the Aboriginal People's Television Network. Michael Gray Eyes is another person that came about because of all that. I haven't looked at Martin Sensmeyer's career, but I'm positive he's from Alaska. I wouldn't be surprised if he got his break from doing APTN productions and then eventually getting enough cred to be down in obviously in LA and doing productions there. But we'll get there. 5 years ago, I didn't feel good about it. When I first started this podcast 4 years ago, I didn't feel good about the prospect of it. 3 years ago now, 4 years ago. But I feel good about it now. So, I'm glad to hear you're feeling better. Sorry I had to go to the hospital during the holidays. Yeah, it wasn't fun. But your kids are all home for break and you have to be sick at home. It wasn't good. So, got a comment here. Eli Funaro would be a great guest for Echo or native related movies. Okay, I'll have to look that person up. He has a podcast called Comic Book Bullies and writes for a tribe called Geek. Oh, no way. That would be a good person. Um, so one individual's comment, Ronaldo, how did you feel about the KKK scene in Killers of the Flower Moon? I know moments like that happened in the past, but it still made my skin crawl. Yeah, I feel like those are important to tell. Um, I like Killers of the Flower Moon is an important movie from the standpoint of it's not a story that is talked about enough. If nothing else, that is the most important thing. In the same way that Joe Rogan talks about 90% of all native or indigenous people were killed by disease like from contact to 1600 or whatever time frame is given, that's important to talk about too. Like those are facts that don't get talked about enough. Um, but the whole picture needs to be told. And I feel like the same issue with Killers of the Flower Moon. They told a very specific perspective of a historical event that did happen and does not get talked about and is not but what we did offer is an opportunity for people to discuss it now. So while it was uncomfortable, I'm like, hey, we're looking at the truth for the most part. I think if you want the truth from a native lens, Pipe for February is a book written by a native author, and it is the same timeline, the same story. Not the same exact story because this is written by a white author and it's basically the creation of the FBI. This is not the same story. Pipe for February is like the same time frame from a native perspective, I should say, from an Osage perspective. So, highly encourage you. I mean, I'm native. I'm a Native American Studies freaking graduate, and I never knew about the Osage murders. Full disclosure, one of the books, A Pipe for February, was on my syllabus for one of my classes, and I didn't read it. So that's on me. I would have learned about it if I read all my books. Um, but if you've ever been a part of a college course, you know that they make you buy 14, 15 books, and then you only read like a few chapters of every single one of them. So we didn't read all of A Pipe for February. But I have that book somewhere in my garage. So someone's comment, random, but still the best Native Ally movie is Last of the Dogmen. Still pretty underrated Indian film too. Yeah, I need to give that one a watch. I still haven't watched that one. There's a few of those like big hitters that I haven't watched yet. I dropped a confession the other night on IG. Last of the Dogmen is one that's on my list that I just haven't got to. But non-native related, I've never seen The Godfather or The Godfather 2. I've been told to avoid The Godfather 3, but I've never seen Godfather 1 or 2 and just haven't never done it. So I need to do that. I need to see Last of the Dogmen. 2024 is going to be the year of the movie. Let's see. Yeah, I never knew about Osage and the oil thing. That's what someone said. Yeah, it's important. It's important to know about because now we can look into it and more publicity will be given to it. And I'm positive there are still fights for head rights right now. I am positive of it between the tribe and everybody else. The people, the way that it was acquired illegally or nefariously, rather legal for the time, but not ethically. I'm positive some of those head rights are still making people money. Pioneer woman. If you ever want to Google something interesting, Google Pioneer woman and Osage. Pioneer woman, her family apparently is a part of some of these scandals because her family, I believe, was either the owner of a general store and was an undertaker way back in the day, and so Pioneer Woman's family historically would obtain head rights of Osage people, and that's apparently how some of their family wealth was obtained. And they have generation wealth, obviously, because that was starting off in the 1800s, early 1900s, rather. And that can build generational wealth, and then also take oil head rights from the rightful owners, which should be the Osage people. So something else to look into. Um, Looks like we got a few comments. I haven't seen The Godfather either. I got to get to them at some point. Yeah, that is a 2024 goal. Another comment. I love the new Marvel What If episode about Kahori. Too short, but still awesome. I agree. So, no, I agree. I had that's on my watch list. So, What If is on my watch list. I think it's episode 3 is the one with Kahori in it. I really want to watch that one. What are your perfect movies? I always judge on mine. Man, perfect movies. I don't know. That's a tough one. If it fluctuates. It's changed throughout my life, so it's real difficult to say what my perfect movies are right now because I just watch a bunch of kid movies. So I don't know. It's really hard off top of my head. I think one of my um movies that I saw that was just like, "Whew, what a movie." Um, I saw Whiplash again recently. That's I think a damn near flawless movie, in my opinion. That was great. Highly encourage you to go watch Whiplash if you've never seen that. Uh, Fancy Dance to me is king right now. That has yet to make its way off of the festival circuit and into distribution. But Fancy Dance is a damn near perfect movie. I encourage you to go watch that one when it does come out. Another Lily Gladstone one. It's an independent film. She should have been nominated for that one instead. And then let's see. I would recommend Goodfellas, is what somebody said. Yeah, that's a good one. I've seen that. I've seen Goodfellas. I've seen Casino. I've seen all the other like mob mafia classics, but I haven't seen Godfather. All right, let's see. Casino is good. I tend not to get into those types of movies. It's depressing. So Crazy Horse was good only if I can be found in the US, what I know of. Another comment is the original Rocky is about as good as it gets. Oh yeah, that's a good one. Because of my age, like Rocky 2 is better, but that's debatable. So we're getting off course talking about native stuff, but if you got any questions, drop it in the chat. I appreciate everyone jumping on with me tonight. Um, what I wanted to talk about for those of you that missed it, I talked about Echo. Really excited for Echo. Can't wait to see that one. Killers of the Flower Moon. Lily Gladstone did win for Best Actress in a drama, so that's great. I always feel like award in the Golden Globe, so that way they can snub you for the Oscars. But it's remain to be seen how that's going to transpire. And then I talked about Taylor Sheridan on Joe Rogan's podcast. He was a guest last week, and I was on that. I watched the episode because one, it was a 3.5 hour episode, but I watched it because I was curious what they would say about Native people. Rolando said, "Have you seen how natives are depicted in foreign media like anime or manga?" No, I can't imagine it's favorable based on what I've seen in random Korean films and especially in K-pop. Um, I imagine it's very stereotypical, and I imagine that it is not factual or based in history. It's probably just stereotypes and what seems fun to them, to content creators in anime or manga. Question: Have you heard of any upcoming roles for the cast of Reservation Dogs? For everyone else, no. I've only seen Devery Jacob seems to be the most active out of the core because that's the only name I've seen. Of course, I've seen her in Echo and then What If, and Devery Jacobs just seems to be the most active. I haven't seen anything for DeFaro, Lane Factor, will or Paulina Alexis. Unfortunately, I don't doubt that they all have things in the pipeline, but I do know that Sterling Harjo did say in our interview from Indigenous Talk that a lot of his writers have work upcoming, either writing right now or just greenlit. So they're all working on something. I suspect either end of 24, beginning of 25, we'll see a lot of content from people that were working on Reservation Dogs. Someone had a question. Any thoughts on Buffy St. Marie? Seems like people are attacking her. Man, that's one that I just don't have enough information on. When it comes to pretendians and people calling into question individuals' identity, I have come to the point where my opinion doesn't matter. You know whose opinion I listen to the most is the tribe or the native nation or native nations, if they claim multiple, that they come from. What's interesting is, something I just realized, Pretendians never claim multiple tribes. I just realized that. People who are like who have like come out that like prove that they don't have native ancestry, it's only just one tribe. They're never like biracial or have like um maybe because it's harder to prove like you have multiple enrollment. Anyway, that's beside the point. I'm getting away from my point. When it comes to Buffy St. Marie, I don't know what the tribe that she is claiming she's from has said. And I'm going to leave it to that. If they have released a statement that says Buffy St. Marie is a part of our community and we accept her as one, to me, that is the gospel. I'm going to take that as gospel. An example of another one is Kelsey Aspill, Kelsey Chow. She claimed she was Eastern Band of Cherokee. Eastern Band of Cherokee said, nope, have no record of you or your family. Stop saying you're from the Eastern Band of Cherokee. And I'm like, okay, that's all the evidence I need there. Um, or at least that's convincing enough for me. And but not every tribe has to go out and make a statement. But with Buffy St. Marie, that's where I wait on and I hear from. But in the meantime, I feel like it should be innocent until proven guilty, right? Like I didn't appreciate individuals attacking her and saying that she was a fraud, regardless of what her actual native status was. Same thing with Sasheen Littlefeather. Regardless of what their actual native identity was, you can't deny all the great things they did for Indian country. So that can't be taken away. You could argue that those if it comes to pass that they were in fact not from native communities that they said they were from, you could argue that those opportunities should have went to native people and outcomes would have been different or could have been different based on the communities they were serving. But I don't know. That's just the pretendian thing to me is just it's exhausting to think about because it almost does nothing to care about. It's like, what are we gonna do to prevent that from happening in the future? That's what I'm concerned about. That's what I'm more concerned about. Um, Someone made a comment. I'd like to see more native protagonists in video games in the future. I can only think of a couple. Yeah, like T Hawk is the one that jumps to mind. Night Wolf from Mortal Kombat. Like a lot of fighting games have native characters. Like Turok had a game in Nintendo for a while. Had one on the 64, one on the GameCube. So, yeah, I mean, there definitely have been instances of native characters in video games, but once again, all stereotypical. A lot of it isn't. It's not genre. Like, there's not a. I would love to have. I don't know. I just don't want it. I guess because it would have to be like native led, and where is a native person going to get that kind of money? Because it goes back to the place that we're at. I still got a cough, unfortunately. It still goes to the place we're at. We haven't even touched that with we're barely getting film companies like the film industry media to understand the idea that like, hey, native stories are profitable. We haven't even scratched that surface with video games, with the video game industry. So I think it's gonna be a long time. Unless there's like some blockbuster uh superhero movie, unless there's an Echo video game or something, unless Echo turns out to be some massive hit and it turns into a film or a feature film and then there's a video game spun off of it. Like I don't see it happening. I hope to see more from Lane Factor, who played Cheese. He was one of my favorite. I agree. I'm curious to see what he does. That was his first acting role, and he was the only one out of the group that was their first time ever acting. So I really hope he does more. And someone made a comment, I'm so sad that Trickster got tanked. Yeah, me too. That was awesome. Once again, for at the hands of a trickster, Pretendian, Michelle Latimer, once her identity was questioned enough to the point where it seemed pretty legit that her indigenous claims that she had made were false, the entire thing got nixed, which was a shame because you had a lot of great young native talent on that show. And that was a damn shame. look up one of the people, like Nathan Alexis, who interestingly enough is Paulina Alexis's brother. Nathan Alexis played young Brownie in Reservation Dogs. If you remember him, he knocked it out of the park playing a young Gary Farmer. Just absolutely killed it. You want to talk about perfection? That was perfection. His character playing young Gary Farmer, that shit was perfection. But why I brought that up is he was in Trickster. Like he was great in Trickster. Um, I think there were a few other Anna Lamb, who was also in the Grizzlies, the movie Netflix. The Grizzlies is on Netflix. It's a lacrosse movie, um, dealing with suicide prevention and suicide awareness up in Alaska. It's fantastic, fantastic movie. So yeah, I'm with you. Trickster being canceled was such a damn shame. Um, One comment is whether or not she is indigenous or not. I think she is good-willed. I agree. I agree. I'm with you there. Buffy St. Marie did one thing that was like extremely important for Native people and representation for women. Buffy St. Marie on Sesame Street was like I think when she breastfed during a segment in Sesame Street, and all of the Sesame Street characters came up to her and asked her about why she was breastfeeding and asked like open and honest questions. And Buffy's like, "There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just a piece of my body that provides nourishment to like my child, and this is something that has been going on for time immemorial." And it was very like a body positive message, and it was very much like I don't need to hide my body, like this is something that has to happen and has happened for generations. And up to that point I think people were like, oh, you can't breastfeed him, you have to go to the inconvenient route, you have to shield yourself away from society because we're not supposed to look at that. So I think if you can go on YouTube and look up Buffy St. Marie Sesame Street, like that's I think the only appearance that she has on it. And yeah, it was great. Like, there's a lot of things she did like that, and a lot of things behind the scenes that weren't like publicized. I think that we should all acknowledge as well. So, one question: have you seen the? Someone said anime manga like Golden Kamuy and Vinland Saga have better depictions of indigenous people, including the Anu of Hokkaido. God, I'm terrible at this, and the Mi'kmaq people. Recommend checking those out if you're interested. All right, I'll look those up. Young Brownie was perfection. Yes. So someone made a comment. Have you seen the YouTube channel where this white guy goes to different communities and visits a few indigenous communities? Yeah. I actually follow that guy on YouTube. What the heck is his name? I followed him because I was watching a I was watching him do he went to the Mormon community. I'm not Mormon. I have this fascination with Mormon people, like specifically like polygamists. And Peter Santaneo, I believe is his name. Oh, somebody dropped in the chat. Yeah, Peter Santaneo. And I just watched like 4 or 5 different Mormon videos that were on there. And then I saw like the recommended videos, and one of them was he went to a few reses. So I haven't watched those videos. I just was like, what am I gonna learn listening to this movie about res life? But I should check it out. I should check it out for sure. Cool. Well, I'd like to keep these things at an hour, if not shorter. I was hoping to do 30 minutes, but I'm really happy that it went longer. Appreciate everybody hopping on the live. Um, I'm gonna try to do this next week, if not the following week for sure. And I'd like to push out my episode on Killers of the Flower Moon. And I'm really excited for Tuesday. So those of you that are still on, Tuesday is when Echo drops. Go watch Echo, support native content, and I'm really excited for it. I'm really excited to talk about it. So next week, hopefully, I have binged it and we can talk about Echo. All right, everybody. Talk to you later.